My brother was the golden child, and I was the family scapegoat. When I inherited our grandmother's beloved seaside cottage, he and his fiancée demanded I give it to them for their dream life. My narcissistic parents took their side, threatening to destroy me if I refused. They thought they had me cornered, but they didn't know the secrets our grandmother had hidden within the cottage walls. I'm a podcast producer, and in a special series that became an extramarital affairs podcast, I told a story about a prominent family's betrayal that brought their entire world crashing down. This is not just a revenge story. It's the story of how I untangled decades of lies and took back my life. If you enjoyed this video or found it helpful, go ahead and give it a like. It really helps me out. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any future videos. Thanks a bunch! The air in my parents' formal living room was the same as it had always been. A sterile blend of potpourri and expectation. It was a museum of a room, a place where life was staged, not lived. I was perched on the edge of a stiff, antique sofa that had probably cost more than my car, my hands clutching a cold glass of iced tea. Across from me, my brother, Leo, sat lounged in a wingback chair like a young king holding court. His fiancée, Chloe, was nestled beside him, a portrait of polished perfection. And my parents, David and Carol Archer, sat together on the matching love seat, their posture a perfect embodiment of their united front. This wasn't a family chat. This was an ambush. "Mia, darling," my mother began, her voice smooth and practiced, the one she used on difficult clients at their architectural firm. "We're so glad you could make it. We just think it's time we all got on the same page about the wedding." I took a slow sip of my tea. I thought we were on the same page. Leo and Chloe are getting married in May. I've already RSVP'd. A flicker of annoyance crossed Chloe's perfectly made-up face before being replaced by a radiant, weaponized smile. "Oh, sweetie, of course. We're so excited you're coming. It's just about the venue. Here we go." For the past month, ever since they announced their engagement, this had been a low, persistent hum beneath every family interaction. The venue was my house. Or rather, my grandmother's house, which she had left to me, and only me, when she passed away a year ago. It was a small, rambling cottage nestled on a breathtaking piece of land on Sullivan's Island, just outside Charleston, South Carolina. It was the only place on earth I had ever felt truly at peace. It was my sanctuary. To them, it was real estate. "I told you, Chloe," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "The cottage isn't a wedding venue. It's old, it's small, and the septic system would probably explode if more than 10 people used it at once." Leo chuckled, a dismissive, airy sound. "Oh, Mia, always so literal. Don't worry about the logistics. Dad and I have already talked to a contractor. We can bring in generators, luxury restroom trailers. It's all solvable. Imagine it, Chloe. A sailcloth tent on the lawn, the ocean in the background. It would be the wedding of the year." He wasn't talking to me anymore. He was selling a vision to his fiancée, his voice resonating with the practiced charm he used to flip historic Charleston properties for a massive profit. I was just a stubborn fixture, a creaky floorboard in his dream house. My father leaned forward, adopting his reasonable man persona. "Mia, what Leo is trying to say is that this would mean a great deal to the family. Your grandmother loved that house, and what better way to honor her memory than to host the first wedding of her grandchildren there?" The mention of my grandmother was a deliberate, calculated strike. He knew she was my weak spot. The cognitive dissonance was a physical ache in my chest. The man who was supposed to protect me was using my most cherished relationship as leverage against me. "I don't think Grandma would want 150 people trampling her garden and spilling champagne on her floorboards," I said quietly. Chloe sighed, a delicate theatrical sound of pure exasperation. She placed a hand on Leo's arm. "Mia, let's just be honest. We're all adults here. That property is one of the most valuable on the island. It's a huge asset, and it's just sitting there." My spine went rigid. "It's not an asset, and it's my home." "But it's not really, is it?" Leo chimed in, his tone shifting from charming to condescending. "You live in your little apartment downtown. You go out there, what, a couple of weekends a month? Be realistic. You're not using it to its full potential." The full potential. That was their mantra. For the Archer family, everything had to be optimized, leveraged, and monetized. Feelings were liabilities. Memories were intangible, and therefore worthless. I was the family's great disappointment precisely because I traded in these worthless commodities. I was a sound engineer and podcast producer. I spent my days editing audio, crafting stories that had no physical form. To them, it was a hobby, not a career. Leo sold million-dollar houses. I told stories into the void. Look, Chloe said, leaning forward as if sharing a generous secret. And Sharon, we have a proposal, one that's actually incredibly beneficial for you too. My father nodded encouragingly. Just listen with an open mind, Mia. I knew with a sickening certainty that this was the moment the ambush would turn into an execution. Leo took a deep breath, puffing up his chest. We want you to give us the house. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall seemed to hold its breath. I stared at him, convinced I had misheard. Give it to you? I repeated, my voice hollow. I'm ready to now. AAS a wedding gift, Chloe clarified, as if this were the most normal, logical thing in the world. Think about it. We'll get married there, the beautiful, sentimental ceremony Dad was talking about. And then, after the wedding, we'll take it over. We'll renovate it, flip it, and use the profits as a down payment on our dream home in the historic district. And of course we'll give you a small percentage for your trouble. Say, 5%? It's basically free money for you. Free money. For giving them my grandmother's soul. I felt a dizzying wave of disbelief. This wasn't just entitlement. This was a level of narcissistic delusion that was almost breathtaking in its audacity. They had rehearsed this. The four of them had sat in this very room and planned out how they would steal my inheritance, and they had managed to frame it as a favor to me. I looked at my parents, searching for some sign of dissent, some flicker of outrage on my behalf. There was nothing. My mother was smiling serenely, a picture of maternal benevolence. My father was nodding, a proud, statesmanlike expression on his face. They were in on it. They approved. My entire life had been a masterclass in this dynamic. Leo was the sun. I was a distant, problematic moon. He was the golden boy, the charismatic heir to the Archer legacy. I was the quiet, sensitive one, the one who didn't fit. When Leo got a C in calculus, my father hired him a tutor and praised his effort. When I got a BA in the same class, he asked why it wasn't an A. When Leo crashed his first car, a brand new BMW my parents had bought him for his 16th birthday, they rushed to the scene, comforted him, and had a new one delivered the following week. When I scraped the side of my 10-year-old Honda, my father lectured me for an hour about irresponsibility and made me pay for the repairs out of my own savings. It wasn't just my parents. Leo himself was a master of a particular kind of casual cruelty. He knew I was terrified of public speaking. In high school, when I had to give a presentation, he'd sit in the back of the auditorium with his friends, making faces and fake coughing every time I stumbled over a word. When I confronted him later, my eyes full of tears, he just laughed. Oh, relax, Mia. I was just trying to loosen you up. You're always so serious. It's for your own good. For my own good, it was the family motto. Every criticism, every slight, every moment of blatant favoritism was packaged as a lesson designed for my benefit. I was being difficult. I was overreacting. I was misremembering. I was too sensitive. For years, I had believed them. My learned helplessness was a comfortable, familiar cloak. It was easier to believe I was flawed than to accept the terrifying truth that my family simply did not love me in the way I needed them to. But my grandmother, Eleanor, had been my antidote. She was my mother's mother, a woman who smelled of salty air and chamomile tea. She saw me. When I showed her my first clumsy attempts at writing, she didn't call it a hobby. She didn't call it a hobby. She called me a storyteller. When I confessed my anxieties, she didn't tell me I was too sensitive. She told me it meant I had a big heart. The cottage was her sanctuary, and she made it mine too. We'd spend hours there, hunting for sea glass, reading on the porch, and recording our conversations on her old cassette recorder. Semyama would say, "You just have to learn how to listen." When she died, leaving the cottage to me was her final act of seeing me. The will was explicit. It was for my sole and exclusive use, to be a place of peace and creativity. She had known, even then, that I would need a fortress. And now they wanted to tear it down. No, I said. The word was small, but it felt massive in my mouth. It was a word I had rarely used with them. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. The benevolent masks dropped. My father repeated, his voice taking on a hard edge. What do you mean, no? After everything we just laid out? It's not for sale, I said, my voice gaining strength. And it's not a gift, it's mine. Grandma gave it to me. Grandma is dead, Leo snapped, his charm vanishing to reveal the ugly grasping thing beneath. She's not the one who has to live in the real world. Chloe and I are trying to build a future. You're clinging to a pile of old wood out of sentimentality. It's selfish, selfish? I laughed, a raw, incredulous sound. You're asking me to give you my inheritance, and I'm the one who's selfish? And you are being incredibly difficult, Mia, my mother said, her voice dripping with disappointment. It was her deadliest weapon. Not anger, but a profound, sorrowful sigh that communicated how deeply I had failed her. Your brother is getting married. This is supposed to be a happy time for our family. And you are deliberately creating conflict. They were doing it again, twisting reality until I was the aggressor. I was the one creating the problem by not giving them what they wanted. It was textbook. So I'm not creating conflict, I said, standing up. My legs felt shaky, but I forced them to hold me. This was it, the moment I had to choose. I was forming a boundary, a wall of my own, and I knew they would try to tear it down. You are, by asking for something that isn't yours. The answer is no. It will always be no. The cottage is off limits. I turned and walked out of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I could feel their collective fury, a palpable heated wave at my back. I didn't wait for them to say anything else. I got in my car and drove, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I didn't drive back to my apartment. I drove to the island. I drove to the cottage. As soon as I turned onto the sandy lane that led to the house, my breathing started to even out. The little blue cottage, with its weathered gray shingles and porch swing, looked exactly as it always had. It was a place outside of time, outside of my family's toxic orbit. I let myself in, and the familiar scent of old books and salt air wrapped around me like a hug. I spent the next 2 days in a self-imposed exile, my phone turned off. I walked on the beach. I sat on the porch and watched the tide come in. I tried to fortify myself to shore up the new wall I had built, but their words echoed in my head. Selfish, difficult. You're ruining the family. Was I? The years of conditioning were a powerful current, and I felt myself starting to drift. On the third day, driven by a need to feel close to my grandmother, I decided to tackle a project I'd been putting off, sorting through the last of her things in the attic. The attic was a dusty, sun-drenched space filled with forgotten treasures. Old furniture, stacks of National Geographic, and a large cedar chest in the corner. I opened the chest. It was filled with quilts and old photo albums. But underneath it all, there was a small, locked metal box. I'd never seen it before. My curiosity piqued. I looked around for a key. Taped to the underside of the chest's lid was a small, tarnished brass key with a note attached, written in my grandmother's spidery handwriting. It said one word: listen. I unlocked the box. Inside, there was no jewelry, no money, no precious heirlooms. There was just a stack of old cassette tapes, each one carefully labeled with a date, and a single sealed envelope with my name on it. My heart started to pound. These were the tapes we had made together, our recorded conversations. But why would she have locked them away? I took the envelope and the tapes downstairs to the living room. With trembling hands, I tore open the seal. The letter inside was dated a week before she died. My dearest Mia Mouse, it began. If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and it probably means they have started to circle. I know your father, and I know your brother. I know their nature. They see this house not as a home, but as a prize. They will try to take it from you. They will tell you that you are selfish, that you are difficult, that you are standing in the way of the family's happiness. Do not believe them. I have left you this house not just as a sanctuary but as a shield, and in this box I have left you a sword. The story of our family, the one you have been told, is a beautiful piece of architecture, designed by your father. But the foundation is rotten. Your mother, my daughter, she is not the happy woman she pretends to be. She has lived her life in a gilded cage, and your father holds the key. For 30 years he has had another life, another woman. A secret that everyone in our circle pretends not to know. I could not bear to see my daughter's heart break, so I kept silent. It was a cowardice I regret to my dying day, but I watched, and I listened, and I recorded. These tapes are not our conversations, my love. These are my audio diaries, my testament, and something more. There is one tape, the last one, that you must listen to very carefully. It is a conversation I recorded without his knowledge. Your father, in his own words, his own voice. I don't know if you will need this. I pray you don't. But if they try to take this last piece of me from you, if they try to erase you as they have tried to erase your mother's pain, you will have the truth. And the truth, Mia, is a story that demands to be told. Use it wisely. Be brave. All my love forever. Grandma Eleanor sat there, the letter shaking in my hand, the world tilting on its axis. My father, an affair. For 30 years, my mother, new? The serene smiles, the united front, the constant low-grade tension in our house that I could never name. It all suddenly snapped into a horrifying crystal-clear focus. My mother wasn't my father's partner, she was his hostage. Her codependency wasn't a choice, it was a survival mechanism. And her occasional barbs at me, her siding with my father. It wasn't because she didn't love me, it was misplaced rage. She couldn't be angry at him, so she was angry at me for not playing the game, for not pretending. I looked at the stack of tapes, a sword. My grandmother had left me a weapon. I have a podcast, a small one, called Fading Echoes, where I tell stories about forgotten pieces of local history. It was my passion project, the one thing that was truly mine. I had the equipment, I had the skills, I knew how to tell a story. A cold, terrifying and exhilarating idea began to form in my mind. My family wanted a story. They wanted to tell the story of the selfish daughter who ruined her brother's wedding. Fine, I would tell a story too. But my story would be the truth. The week that followed my discovery in the attic was the quietest, most intense week of my life. I didn't leave the cottage. I unplugged from the world and plugged into my grandmother's. I bought an old cassette player from a thrift store in town, and one by one, I listened to the tapes. It was an experience that fundamentally rewired my understanding of my own life. I heard my grandmother's voice, clear and steady, chronicling 30 years of quiet observation. She spoke of dinner parties where my father's hand would linger too long on the arm of a family friend, a prominent Charleston socialite named Catherine Vance. She described my mother's brittle smiles, the late-night phone calls that my father would take on the porch, the business trips that always seemed to coincide with Catherine's trips abroad. It wasn't just a chronicle of betrayal, it was a study in psychology. My grandmother, with her simple, profound wisdom, had dissected the entire toxic ecosystem of our family. She spoke of my father's deep hunger to be admired, a narcissism that made him believe he was entitled to have everything he wanted, without consequence. She described my mother's willful blindness, a trauma bond so profound that she had chosen the stability of a sham marriage over the chaos of the truth, making herself a willing accomplice in her own misery. And she spoke of me. They are angry with Mia because she is a mirror. Her voice crackled through the small speaker one night. When they look at her, they see the things they are missing in themselves. A quiet strength, an unwillingness to perform. They call her sensitive. What they mean is that she feels things, and her feelings are an inconvenience to their lies. Hearing my entire existence validated by the one person I trusted most was like a dam breaking inside me. The years of self-doubt, of wondering if I was the crazy one, washed away, leaving behind a hard, clean bedrock of certainty. Then I listened to the last tape, the one my grandmother had told me to listen to carefully. The quality was poor, recorded from a distance, but the voices were unmistakable. It was a conversation between my grandmother and my father, recorded in the sunroom of this very cottage, just a few months before she died. She knows, David, my grandmother's voice said, firm and weary. Carol knows everything. This charade is killing her. Carol and I have an understanding. My father's voice replied, cold and dismissive. What I do in my private life is my business. I have provided for her. I have given her a beautiful life. She has nothing to complain about. Nothing but her soul? And what about Catherine? Does her husband know he's been a fool for 3 decades? That's between Catherine and me. It has worked for us. Don't interfere, Eleanor. You've always enjoyed playing the martyr, but this does not concern you. It concerns my daughter. And it concerns my granddaughter. You and your son. You are 2 of a kind. You think you can just take whatever you want. You think Mia will just roll over when you come for this house, but you're wrong. She's stronger than you think. She's a sentimental child, he scoffed. She'll do what's best for the family when the time comes. She always does. I stopped the tape, my hands shaking. She'll do what's best for the family. He was so sure of me, so confident in my conditioning. He had no idea he was speaking to a ghost, and that his words were being immortalized on a thin strip of magnetic tape. I finally turned my phone back on. It was a deluge. Dozens of missed calls and texts. My mother, pleading with me to be reasonable. My father, with short, clipped messages demanding I call him immediately. And Leo, a string of texts that escalated from cajoling to outright rage. And Mia, seriously, call me. We can work this out. Don't be a child. You're punishing everyone because you can't have your way. Fine, you want to play it this way. You're not just ruining my wedding. You're ruining your relationship with this entire family. Forever. Hope the damn house is worth it. I didn't reply. I just screenshotted everything and saved it to a folder. Then I went to my podcasting equipment which I'd brought with me from the city. I set up my professional microphone in the quiet living room, the same room where my grandmother had recorded my father's confession. And I began to work. I decided to call the series The House on Sparrow Point. I wouldn't use their names. Not at first. I would frame it as a piece of local, anonymous storytelling. The story of a prominent, unnamed Charleston family and the secrets hidden within the walls of a beloved family home. The first episode was a masterpiece of implication. I used my skills as a sound engineer to create a rich, atmospheric soundscape. The sound of waves crashing, the creak of old floorboards, the distant chime of a grandfather clock. I told the story of the golden son and the scapegoat daughter, of the beautiful fiancée with grasping hands, and of the outrageous demand for an inheritance. I kept my narration calm, observational, almost journalistic. I ended the episode with a simple question. What happens when a family's love is conditional, and the price of belonging is your own soul? I uploaded it on a Tuesday. The reaction was immediate. My podcast had a small but loyal local following. People started messaging me. Is this about who I think it's about? This sounds so familiar. The Charleston Old Money Circle is a small, insular world. Secrets are its currency, and the vagueness of my story was like blood in the water for sharks. My mother called that evening. Mia, I listened to your program, she said, her voice tight with fury. People are talking. You are airing our family's private business in public. I have no idea what you're talking about, Mom, I said, my voice a perfect imitation of breezy innocence. It's an anonymous story about archetypes. Lots of families have these dynamics. If you see yourself in it, maybe that's something you should think about. I could hear her sputtering on the other end before she hung up. The gaslighting was so reflexive for her, she couldn't even compute it when it was turned back on her. The next day Leo showed up at the cottage. He stormed onto the porch, his handsome face contorted with rage. Take it down, he snarled. Take it down right now. Take what down? I asked, sipping my coffee on the porch swing. I was enjoying this far more than I probably should have. Don't play dumb with me, Mia. Your stupid little podcast, you're trying to ruin my wedding. Your wedding seems to be doing a fine job of ruining itself, I said calmly. Look, Leo, I tell stories for a living. This one is resonating with people. It's not my fault if it hits a little close to home for you. I'll sue you for slander, he shouted. Slander? I raised an eyebrow. Against whom? I haven't used a single name. Are you going to go into court and announce that you're the selfish, unnamed golden boy from the story? That's a bold legal strategy. Let me know how it works out for you. He stood there, speechless, his fists clenched. He was so used to winning, so used to people folding under his rage, that he didn't know how to handle calm, logical defiance. He just stormed off, slamming the gate behind him. I released the second episode on Friday. This one was different. This one was about the mother of the family, the graceful matriarch who enabled her husband's cruelty. And this time, I used my sword. I wove in snippets of my grandmother's audio diaries. Her voice, frail but clear, was instantly recognizable to anyone who had known her. I watched my daughter shrink herself to fit into the life her husband demanded. Her voice crackled through the episode. A woman's heart is a house. And he had asked her to board up every window and live in the dark. The fallout from that episode was nuclear. The anonymity was gone. Everyone knew who I was talking about. Everyone knew whose voice that was. My mother stopped calling. The entire family went silent. It was the silence of panicked animals, realizing the trap had been sprung. The climax came that Sunday. My father, my mother, Leo, and Chloe all drove out to the island. They didn't storm the porch this time. They stood on the lawn, a grim four-person delegation. They looked exhausted, defeated. "All right, Mia," my father said, his voice heavy. The bluster was gone. "You've made your point. This has gone far enough. What do you want?" "What do I want?" I asked, standing on the top step of the porch, looking down on them. The power dynamic had been permanently inverted. "What I've always wanted, to be left alone, for you to leave me in this house in peace, and you'll stop?" Chloe asked, her voice a venomous hiss. "You'll take down the podcast and stop telling these lies?" "They're not lies, Chloe," I said, "and I don't think I will. In fact, I'm releasing the third and final episode tomorrow morning. I think it's my best work yet. It's a very intimate piece, a two-person scene, just a father and his mother-in-law having a very honest conversation about his 30-year affair with Catherine Vance. The audio quality is a little rough, but the dialogue is crystal clear. I think you'll recognize the voices." My father's face went white. My mother made a small, strangled sound and put a hand to her mouth. She hadn't known about the tape. She had only known the secret. She had never heard the proof. Leo stared at his father, his expression a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Chloe was looking back and forth between them all, her calculating mind trying to figure out how this new information affected her investment. "You wouldn't," my father whispered, his voice hoarse. "Wouldn't I?" I said. "You raised me," I said. "You taught me that in this family you use every weapon you have to protect what's yours. I'm just finally following your advice." I gave them my ultimatum. They would leave me and the cottage alone forever. They would call every family member they had sicked on me and retract their stories, admitting they had pressured me unfairly. Leo and Chloe would find a new venue for their wedding. In exchange, the final episode of The House on Sparrow Point would never air. "So you have until midnight to decide," I said. "If I don't hear from you, the episode goes live at 6 a.m. I went back inside and closed the door. They didn't take until midnight. The call came an hour later. It was my father. "We agree to your terms," he said, his voice a dead monotone. There was no apology, no remorse. Just the cold, hard calculus of a man trying to mitigate his losses. The next few weeks were a quiet revolution. The wedding was postponed indefinitely, according to a terse announcement from Chloe's family. I heard from a cousin that Chloe had called off the engagement, telling Leo she wasn't signing up for a scandal-plagued family with no assets. Her love, it turned out, was as conditional as theirs. My parents held up their end of the bargain. The calls from relatives stopped. I received a few awkward, fumbling apology texts. Leo disappeared from my life completely. I heard he'd lost his real estate license over some shady dealings that came to light when people started digging into his father's business practices. The rot, it turned out, went deep. My mother was the only one who tried to maintain contact. She sent me a long, rambling email a month later, full of justifications and blame. It was my fault for making things public, for not handling it discreetly. She never once mentioned the affair. She was still living in the house with the boarded-up windows. I wrote back a single sentence: "I wish you peace, Mom, but my peace depends on my distance from you." I blocked her email address. I never did release that final episode. The threat was enough. The sword was more powerful when left sheathed. My life is quiet now, but it's a real quiet, not a fearful one. I still live in my apartment in Charleston, but I spend most of my time at the cottage. It's no longer a fortress, it's just a home. Fading Echoes has become surprisingly popular. I've started getting emails from people, sharing their own stories of family secrets and finding their voice. I'm telling their stories now. Sometimes, when I'm working late in the living room, editing a piece of audio, I'll look at the spot where my grandmother's chair used to be. I think about the legacy she left me. It wasn't the house, not really. It was the truth. She taught me that the most powerful thing in the world is a story, and that the person who controls the narrative controls everything. My family spent my whole life trying to write my story for me. They wanted me to be the villain, the scapegoat, the tragic, difficult girl. They just never imagined that one day I would pick up the pen and write my own ending.